study this one. I will share the screen. Yesterday, we've learned some like basic conditioning and
Right.
Pavlov's experiment. And today, let's review a little bit more. So, once a CS is conditional stimulus, elicit a CR conditional response, it is possible briefly to use that CS as a US unconditional stimulus in order to condition a response to a new stimulus. This process is known as second order or higher order conditioning. So this is first order conditioning and this is second order conditioning. By using a dog and a bell as our example, after the dog salivates to the bell, first order conditioning, the bell can be paired repeatedly with a flash of light, and the dog will salivate to the light alone. This is second order conditioning. Even though the light has never been paired with the food, like this. Look at this table. So training, acquisition, the first order conditioning, presentation of bell plus food, then the dog shows some salivation, and acquisition later, presentation of bell and the dog itself just salivation. But second order conditioning, after first order conditioning has occurred, and then training like that, presentation of light plus bell, then salivation, and acquisition, light, salivation, like this. And now look at biology and classical conditioning. As is evident from its description, classical conditioning can be used only when one wants to pair an involuntary natural response with something else. Once one has identified the as a US unconditional stimulus, can a subject be taught to pair it equally easily with any CS conditioning stimulus? Not surprisingly, the answer is no. Research suggests that animals and humans are biologically prepared to make certain connections more easily than others. Learned taste aversion are a classic example of this phenomenon. If you ingest an unusual food or drink or then become nauseous, you will probably develop an aversion to the food or drink. Long-taste aversions are interesting because they can result in powerful avoidance responses on the basis of a single pairing. In addition, the two events, eating and sickness, are probably separated by at least several hours. Animals, including people, seem biologically prepared to associate strange tastes with feelings of sickness. Clearly, this response is adaptive, helpful for the survival of the species, because it helps us learn to avoid dangerous things in the future. Also interesting is how we seem to learn what exactly to avoid. Yeast aversions most commonly occur with strong and unusual taste. The food, the conditional stimulus, must be salient in order for us to learn to avoid it. Salient stimuli are easily, are easily noticeable and therefore create a more powerful conditioned response. Sometimes taste aversions are acquired without good reason. If you were to eat some mozzarella sticks a few hours before falling ill with some stomach flu, you might develop an aversion to that popular American appetizer, even though it had nothing to do with your sickness. John Garcia and Robert Coelho performed a famous experiment illustrating how rats more readily learn to make certain associations than others. They used 4 groups of subjects in their experiment and exposed each to a particular combination of CS and US as illustrated in table 6.3. The rats learned to associate noise with shock and unusual tasting water with nausea. However, they were unable to make the connection between noise and nausea and between unusual tasting water and shock. Again, learning to link loud noise with shock, for example, thunder and lightning, and unusual tasting water with nausea seems to be adaptive. The ease with which animals learn taste aversions is known as Garcia effect. So now let's look at table 6.3. Like this. So these are CS conditional stimulus and unconditional stimulus and learned response. So this is very loud noise, and this is sweet water and shock, and they learn fear, and loud noise and nausea, and they learn nothing. And sweet water, shock, they learn nothing. And sweet water and nausea, they just learn avoid water like this. And operant conditioning. Whereas classical conditioning is a type of learning based on association of stimuli, operant conditioning is a kind of learning based on the association of consequences with one's behaviors. Edward Thorndike was one of the first people to research this kind of learning. Thorndike conducted a series of famous experiments using a cat in a puzzle box. The hungry cat was locked in a cage next to a dish of food. The cat had to get out of the cage in order to get the food. Thorndike found that the amount of time required for the cat to get out of the box decreased over a series of trials. This amount of time decreased gradually. The cat did not seem to understand suddenly how to get out of the cage. This finding led Thorndike to assert that the cat learned the new behavior without mental activity, but rather simply connected a stimulus and a response. So, Thorndike put forth the law of effect that says that if the consequences of a behavior are pleasant, the stimulus response SR connection will be strengthened, and the likelihood of the behavior will increase. However, if the consequences of behavior are unpleasant, the SR connection will weaken, and the likelihood of the behavior will decrease. He used the term instrumental learning to describe his work because he believed the consequence was instrumental in shaping future behaviors. P.F. Skinner, who coined the term operant conditioning, is the best-known psychologist to research this form of learning. Skinner invented a special contraption, aptly named a Skinner box, to use in his research of animal learning. A Skinner box usually has a way to deliver food to an animal and a lever to press or disc to pack in order to get the food. The food is called reinforcer, and the process of giving the food is called reinforcement. So reinforcement defined by its consequences. Anything that makes a behavior more likely to occur is a reinforcer. So there are two kinds of reinforcement exist. One is positive reinforcement, refers to the addition of something pleasant. And negative reinforcement refers to the removal of something unpleasant. For instance, if we give a rat in a Skinner box food, when it presses a lever, we are using positive reinforcement. However, if we terminate a loud noise or shock in response to a press of the lever, we are using negative reinforcement. The latter example results in escape learning. Escape learning allows one to terminate an aversive stimulus, an avoidance learning. On the other hand, enables one to avoid the unpleasant stimulus altogether. If Sammy creates a locus in the English class he hates and is asked to leave, he is evidencing escape learning. An example of avoidance learning would be if Sammy cut English class. Affecting behavior by using unpleasant consequences is also possible. Such an approach is known as punishment. By definition, punishment is anything that makes a behavior less likely. There are two types of punishment, are known as positive punishment and okay, let's look at light here, gray side, gray box. Students often confuse negative reinforcement and punishment. However, any type of reinforcement results in the behavior being more likely to be repeated. And the negative reinforcement refers to the fact that something is taken away. The positive in positive punishment indicates that something is added. In negative reinforcement, the removal of an aversive stimulus is what is reinforcing. So you may understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Let's move. Next page. So, addition of something unpleasant and omission, training or negative punishment. The removal of something pleasant. If we give a rat an electric shock every time it touches the lever, we are using punishment. If we remove the rat's foot when it touches the lever, we are using omission training. Both procedures will result in the rat ceasing to touch the bar. Pretend your parents decide to use operant conditioning principles to modify your behavior. If you did something your parents liked and they wanted to increase the likelihood of your repeating the behavior, your parents could use either of the type of reinforcement described in table 6.4. On the other hand, if you did something your parents wanted to discourage, they could use either of the type of punishment described in table 6.5. Let's see. So they are reinforcement and two kinds of reinforcement. One is positive reinforcement, the other one is negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement may add something pleasant, and negative remove something unpleasant. So parents give children presents as reward for cleaning room. And parents stop yelling when child goes to clean room. So these are the difference between positive and negative reinforcement. And let's look at punishment. There are positive punishment and negative punishment. Negative punishment is known as omission training. So positive punishment adds something negative. Like for example, parents yells when child come home after curfew. And omission training remove something pleasant. So parents take away cell phone when child come home after curfew, like this. Then let's look at more about punishment versus reinforcement. Generally, the same ends can be achieved through punishment and reinforcement. If I want students to be on time to my class, I can punish them for lateness or reward them for arriving on time. Punishment is operant conditioning's version of aversive conditioning. Punishment is most effective if it is delivered immediately after the unwanted behavior and if it is harsh. However, harsh punishment may also result in unwanted consequences, such as fear and anger. As a result, most psychologists recommended that certain kinds of punishment be used sparingly, if at all. You might wonder how the rat in the Skinner box learns to push the lever in the first place. Rather than wait for an animal to perform the desired behavior by chance, we usually try to speed up the process by using shaping. So, shaping reinforces the steps used to reach the desired behavior. First, the rat might be reinforced for going to the side of the box with the lever. Then we might reinforce the rat for touching the lever with any part of its body. By rewarding approximations of the desired behavior, we increase the likelihood that the rat will stumble upon the behavior we want. Animals can also be taught to perform a number of responses successively in order to get a reward. This process is known as chaining. One famous example of chained behavior involved a rat named Barnabas, who run through a veritable obstacle course in order to obtain a food reward. Whereas the goal of shaping is to mold a single behavior. The goal in training is to link together a number of separate behaviors into a more complex activity. The terms acquisition, extinction, spontaneous recovery, discrimination, and generalization can be used in our discussion of operant conditioning too. Using a rat in a Skinner box as our example, acquisition occurs when the rat learns to press the lever to get the reward. Extinction occurred when the rat ceases to press the lever because the reward no longer results from this action. Note that punishing the rat for pressing the lever is not necessary to extinguish the response. Behaviors that are not reinforced will ultimately stop and last as to be an extinction schedule. Spontaneous recovery would occur if, after having extinguished the bar press response and without providing any further training, the rat began to press the bar again. Generalization would be if the rat began to press other things in the Skinner box or the bar in other boxes. Discrimination would involve teaching the rat to press only a particular bar or press the bar only under certain conditions. So these are discrimination stimulus. So here, acquisition, the rat learns to press the bar for food. And extinction, the rat unlearns the far-food connection. And spontaneous recovery, after extinction and a period of rest, the rat pressed the bar again. And generalization, the rat pressed another object that looked like the bar. And discrimination, the rat learns to press only a particular bar. So, not all reimpulses are food. Of course, psychologists speak of two main types of reimpulse, primary and secondary. Primary reimpulses are in and of themselves rewarding. They include things like food, water, and breath, whose natural properties are reimpulsing. Secondary reimpulses are things we have learned to value, such as praise or the chance to play a video game. Money is a special kind of secondary reinforcer for the generalized reinforcer because it can be traded for virtually anything. One particular application of generalized reinforcers is known as a token economy. In a token economy, every time people perform a desired behavior, they are given a token. Periodically, they are allowed to trade their token for any one of a variety of reinforcers. Token economies have been used in prison, mental institutions, and even schools. Intuitively, you probably realize that what functions as a reinforcer for some may not have the same effect on others. Even primary reinforcers, like food, will affect different animals in different ways, depending, most notably, on how hungry they are. This idea that the reinforcing properties of something depends on the situation is expressed in the Primack principle. It explains that whichever of two activities is proper can be used to reinforce per the activity that is not prepared. For instance, if Peter likes apples but does not like to practice for his piano lesson, his mother could use apples to reinforce practicing the piano. In this case, eating an apple is a prepared activity. However, Peter's brother, Michel, does not like the fruit, including apples, but he loves to play the piano. In his case, playing the piano is a prepared activity, and his mother can use it to reinforce him for eating an apple. And there are reinforcement schedule. So when you are first teaching a new behavior, rewarding the behavior each time is best. So this process is known as continuous reinforcement. However, once the behavior is learned, higher response rates can be obtained using certain partial reinforcement schedule. In addition, according to the partial reinforcement effect, behaviors will be more resistant to extinction if the animal has not been reinforced continuously. Reinforcement schedule differ in two ways. What determines when reinforcement is delivered? The number of responses made, or the passage of time. The pattern of reinforcement, either constant or changing. A fixed ratio schedule provides reinforcement after a set number of responses. For example, if a rat is on alpha 5 schedule, it will be rewarded after the fifth bar press. A variable ratio VR schedule also provide reinforcement based on the number of bar presses, but that number varies. A rat on a VR5 schedule might be rewarded after the second press, the ninth press, the third press, the sixth press, and so on. The average number of presses required to receive a reward will be 5. And fixed interval. FI. Schedule required that a certain amount of time elapsed before a bar press will result in a reward. In an FI 3-minute schedule, for instance, the rat will be reinforced for the first bar press that occurs after 3 minutes have passed. A variable interval VI schedule varies the amount of time required to elapse before a response will result in reinforcement. In a VI 3-minute schedule, the rat will be reinforced for the first response made after an average time of 3 minutes. And variable schedules are more resistant to extinction than fixed schedules. Once an animal becomes accustomed to a fixed schedule, a break in the pattern will quickly lead to extinction. However, if the reinforcement schedule has been variable, noticing a break in the pattern is much more difficult. In effect, variable schedules encourage continued responding
on the chance that just one more response is needed to get the reward. And sometimes one is more concerned with encouraging high rates of responding rather than resistance to extinction. For instance, someone who employs factory workers to make widgets wants the workers to produce as many widgets as possible. Ratio schedules promote higher rates of responding than interval schedules. It makes sense that when people are reinforced based on the number of responses they make, they will make more responses than if the passage of time is also a necessary precondition per reinforcement as it is in interval schedules. Factory owners historically paid per piece work. Workers were paid for each completed task rather than by the hour and were thus motivated to work as quickly as they could. And biology and operant conditioning. Just as limits seems to exist concerning what one can classically condition animals to learn, limits seems to exist concerning what various animals can learn to do through operant conditioning. Researchers have found that animals will not perform certain behaviors that go against their natural inclinations. For instance, rats will not walk backward. In addition, pigs refuse to put disc into a bank-like object and tend, instead, to bury the disc in the ground. The tendency for animals to forego reverse to pursue their typical pattern of behavior is called instinctive drift.
This is the schedule of reinforcement. This is fixed, this is variable, and ratio and interval. So, ratio definition is reinforcement is delivered after a set number of responses. Example, a restaurant gives you a free meal after the purchase of the 10 meals. This is good example. And interval.
Reinforcement is delivered after a behavior is performed following the passage of a fixed amount of time. And let's look at example. Going to get lunch at a restaurant that opens promptly at noon.
And here, variable.
Reinforcement is delivered after variable number of responses.
Let's look at the example, slot machine. Pay out on variable ratio schedule. Sometimes it takes just one pull to win, but sometimes it takes hundreds. And here, interval and variable. Reinforcement is delivered after a behavior is performed following the passage of variable amount of time. So look at example. Checking for your mail when your letter carrier schedule is unpredictable. This is a good example. And now let's look at more about cognitive learning.
Analytical behaviors like Skinner assert that learning occurs without thought. However, cognitive theories argue that even classical and operant conditioning have a cognitive component. In classical conditioning, such theorists argue that the subject responds to the CS because they develop the expectation that it will be followed by the US unconditional stimulus. In operant conditioning, cognitive psychology suggests that the subject is cognizant that its response have certain consequences and can therefore act to maximize their reinforcement.
And now let's look at contingency model of classical conditioning.
The Pavlovian model of classical conditioning is known as the contiguity model because it postulates that the more times two things appear, the greater the learning that will take place. So, contiguity, togetherness, determines that the strength of the response. And Robert Rescola revised the Pavlovian model to take into account a more complex set of circumstances. Suppose that dog 1 local is presented with a bell paired with food 10 times in a row. Dog 2 Sparky also experiences 10 pairing of bell and food. However, intermixed with those 10 trials are 5 trials in which food is presented without the bell and 5 more trials in which the bell is wrong but no food is presented. Once these training periods are over, which dog will have a stronger salivation response to the bell?
Intuitively,
You will probably see the rocker wheel. Even though a model based purely on cognition would hypothesize that the two dogs would respond the same since each has experienced 10 pairings of bell and food.
and let's continue.
And Nicholas' model is known as the contingency model of classical conditioning and clearly rests upon a cognitive view of classical conditioning. A is contingent upon B when A depends upon B and vice versa.
In such a case,
The presence of one event reliably predicts the presence of the other. In low-cost case, the food is contingent upon the presentation of the bell. One does not appear without the other. In Sparky's experience, sometimes the bell rings and no snacks are served,
Other times, snakes appear without the annoying bell, and sometimes they appear together. Sparky learns less because, in her case, the relationship between the CS and US is not as clear. The difference in locus and Sparky's response strongly suggests that their expectations or source influenced their learning. In addition to operant and classical conditioning, cognitive theorists have described a number of additional kinds of learning. These include observational learning, latent learning, abstract learning, and insight learning. And observational learning. So as you are no doubt aware, people and animals can learn many things simply by observing others. Watching children play house, for example, gives us an indication of all they have learned from watching their families and families of others. Such observational learning is also known as modeling and was studied a great deal by Albert Bandura. Is formulating his social learning theory. This type of learning is said to be species specific. It only occurs between members of the same species. So, modeling has two basic components, observation and imitation. By watching his older sister, a young boy may learn how to hit a baseball. First, he observed her playing baseball with the neighborhood children in his backyard. Next, he picked up a bat and tried to imitate her behavior. Observational learning has a clear cognitive component in that a mental representation of the observed behavior must exist in order to enable the person or animal to imitate it. A significant body of research indicates that children learn violent behaviors from watching violent television programs and violent adult models. Bandura, Rose, and Lowe's classic Bobo doll experiments illustrate this connection. Children were exposed to adults who modeled either aggressive or non-aggressive play with, among other things, an inflatable Bobo doll that would bounce back up after being hit. Later, given the chance to play alone in a room full of toys, including poor Bobo, the children who has witnessed the aggressive adult models exhibit strikingly similar aggressive behavior to that which they have observed. The children in the control group were much less likely to aggress against Bobo, particularly in the ways modeled by the others in the experimental condition. And now let's look at latent learning. Latent learning was studied extensively by Edward Tolman. Latent means hidden, and latent learning is learning that becomes obvious only once a reinforcement is given. Per
demonstrating it. Behaviorists has asserted that learning is evidenced by gradual changes in behavior, but Tolman conducted a famous experiment illustrating that sometimes learning occurs but is not immediately evidenced. Tolman has 3 groups of rats run through a maze on a series of trials. One group got the reward each time it completed the maze, and the performance of these rats improved steadily over the trials. Another group of rats never got the reward, and their performance improved only slightly over the course of the trials. And the third group of rats were not rewarded during the first half of the trials, but was given a reward during the second half of the trials. Not surprisingly, during the first half of the trials, this group's performance was very similar to the group that never got a reward. The interesting finding, however, was that the third group's performance improved dramatically and suddenly once it began to be rewarded for finishing the maze. And Tolman reasons that these rats must have learned their way around the maze during the first set of trials. Their performance did not improve because they have no reason to run the maze quickly. Tolman credited their dramatic improvement in maze running time to latent learning. He suggested that they had made a mental representation or cognitive map of the maze during the first half of the trials and evidenced this knowledge once it would earn them a reward. And abstract learning. Abstract learning involves understanding concepts such as tree or same rather than learning simply to press a bar or pack a disc in order to secure a reward. Some researchers have shown that animals in Skinner box seem to be able to understand such concepts. For instance, pigeons have learned to pack pictures they have never seen before if those pictures were of chairs. In other studies, pigeons have been shown a particular shape and rewarded in one series of trials when they pick the same shape out of 2 choices, and in another set of trials when they peck at the different shapes. Such studies suggest that pigeons can understand concepts and are not simply forming SR connections, as Thorndike and Skinner had argued. And insight learning. Keller is well known for his studies of insight learning in chimpanzees. Insight learning occurs when one suddenly realizes how to solve the problem. You have probably had the experience of skipping over a problem on a test only to realize later in an instance how to solve it. Keller argued that learning often happened in this sudden way due to insight rather than because of the gradual strengthening of the SR connection suggested by the behaviorist. He put chimpanzees into situations and watched how they solved problems. In one study, Keller suspended a banana
from the ceiling well out of reach of the chimpanzees. In the room were several boxes, none of which was high enough to enable the chimpanzees to reach the banana. Keller found that the chimpanzees spent most of their time unproductively rather than slow working toward the solution. They would run around, jump, and be generally upset about their inability to stay the stack until all of a sudden they would file the boxes on top of each other, climb up, and grab the banana. Keller believed that the solution could not occur until the chimpanzees have a cognitive insight about how to solve the problem. So here, there are some boxes. Famous cognitive learning experiment. So Bandura Bobodor experiment and Tolman's latent learning experiment and Queller's insight learning experiment is very famous. So Bobo's experiment, children exposed to an aggressive model imitated the model's behavior, and aggression can be learned through observation, modeling. And Tolman experiment, rats are ran a maze repeatedly, evidence dramatic improvement following the introduction of a reward. So rats learn their way around the maze, created and stored cognitive map, and were able to use the maps when needed. And Keller's insight learning experiment. Chimpanzees solved problems suddenly rather than gradually. So non-human animals are capable of insight. So this is the things up to learning like theory. So do you have any questions about today's lecture?
There are different types of how to learn a certain thing, like the classical operant conditioning, and then types of learning.
Yeah, so your major was education, so you will know some background knowledge about learning
Yeah,
psychology, right? So
yeah,
it's
right.
not very unfamiliar. It's
Mm,
a little bit familiar with you, right?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
So it was like um, a review to
yeah,
the previous lessons that I had before, and
yeah,
also
yeah,
additional information too with some of these experiments.
yeah, yeah. So let's call it a day.
Hmm.
Okay, enjoy your nighttime and see you tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, by the way, I want to ask something because it's we already covered all the makeup classes needed.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, and how many sessions again you enrolled this month?
Uh, I'm not sure because I didn't count.
Ah, I see. Okay. But
Please,
so
please let me know how many classes do we need more, or is that all, or just to?
yeah, we finished all the makeup classes already since we did it 2 times a day, and yesterday it was also twice. And
Okay.
yeah, for the
Uh,
other classes too.
and there's no more makeup class, and
Yeah.
then tomorrow and just let's have a class at just 6:20.
Okay.
6:20 to 7. Okay.
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be okay.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, had a great learning today. See you and yeah, take a rest. Have a great day ahead.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank
Thank you.
you.